Hi everyone, David Aragona and Scott Shapiro here taking a look at the DRF Saturday race of the day, which comes out at Churchill Downs. Race 10 in Louisville, Kentucky is the mile and a 16th Grade 3 Commonwealth Turf for the 3-year-olds on the grass course. Got 11 runners entered for this race. It's a highly competitive field of 3-year-olds late in the season. And Scott, it's a pretty competitive race in the sense that a lot of these horses coming out of the Bryan Station at Keeneland, and you did have a decisive winner there of the number 2 Troubleshooting. He's a horse who was a Grade 1 winner, Grade 1 in quotation marks, from that Franklin Simpson at Kentucky Downs. And he did stretch out in that race, but he's now got to get the mile in a 16th distance, a little bit far for a horse who was thought of as a sprinter early on. And if you're a little bit against him, once you start to get through some of the other contenders in this race, you can go a lot of different directions.
I think we see it similar in that respect. I think this horse got the right trip with the right flow last race. He got the mile. I didn't think he would, but I think he would need everything his way to get that extra 16th of a mile. And at the shortest price in the field, I am very much willing to take a swing against myself.
Let's check out the Timeform US pace projector for this Commonwealth Turf to see if it gives us any clues as to who could trip out in here. And I guess the positive for the number 2 Troubleshooting is that he does have that handy tactical speed. He doesn't need to be in front, so he typically gets good trips in his races, and he drew very well towards the inside once again. So it would not be a surprise if he does get a good forward or pocket trip in this race. But there are some others that want to be forward, particularly the number 6 Mansetti. And Scott, I imagine that if he handles the turf at all, he's going to find himself in front.
One would think they probably are now coming here to try the turf without sending him on the lead. That's been his game, and we saw him take advantage of it in the King's Plate, and he ran 2 good races to follow that, but it will come down to the surface. Sometimes, occasionally, horses don't show that same speed on the surface switch, but I'm willing to take a chance that it won't be Troubleshooting loose on the lead in this field regardless.
Yeah, if he's not aggressively ridden, the number 1 California Burrito has shown some speed on occasion. And even though he's shown further back on the pace projector, the number 8 Chapman's Peak did change around his running style last time, went to the front end, albeit through slower fractions. But we'll see if he gets a slightly more aggressive ride than what this pace projector would indicate. Everybody, if you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button below. I know all the YouTube channels say, like this video because it helps with the algorithm. Well, it really is true. If you want to see more videos like this, just hit that like button and we'll keep producing more content on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Let's go through this field from the rail out, beginning with the number 1 California Burrito. And this horse will be making his turf debut in this race and started out his career on the dirt. Really felt like he came to hand over the all-weather track at Turfway Park last winter. He won the John Battaglia Memorial in a bit of an upset and then came back. Was albeit disappointing in the Jeff Ruby Stakes, but had a bit of a trip the stretch that day, Scott. He took kind of a funny step at the 8th pole and then seemed to not really be able to sustain his momentum through the finish of that race. Obviously, things didn't go right on the dirt over a sloppy track in the Pet Day Mile. He's been off since then, but he's coming back, and I find it interesting coming back and immediately switching to the turf. When you look at this horse's pedigree, there's a lot of grass in there. His second dam was a Grade 3 winner in the Valley View at Keeneland on the turf. The dam, she's a half-sister to Partisan Politics and multiple stakes winner on the turf. And well, you might not think of Army Mule as a turf sire. When you look at the stats in DRF Formulator, he wins with 16% of his turf route starters. So Army Mule is sort of a sneaky turf influence, and I'm not going to be surprised when this horse handles it and runs well against this field.
You definitely have sold me since, I saw your selection before we came on, and you like this horse a little bit. And, I kind of thought of it as a stepping stone to Turfway, but the pedigree is there. He's going to get the right trip, especially if the pace is not, if Mansetti doesn't show the speed that we are accustomed to, he could be right there. He'll be saving ground throughout. So there are a lot worse long shots than California Burrito.
Don't know if we're going to get 20-1 on him. He is a horse that was on the Derby Trail earlier in the year, and he does have a pretty impressive work tab showing for this return to the races. The number 2 Troubleshooting, like we said, probably going to be one of the favorites in this race. He's won 2 graded stakes in a row. Make what you will of that victory at Kentucky Downs 2 back, but he did run well in the last race when he won the Grade 3 Bryan Station at Keeneland because he showed that he could handle the 2 turns, getting the 1 mile distance. And there are some others coming out of here. I'm only going to highlight Troubleshooting because he was the best finisher in this race, and some of the others that are coming back finished further back in the pack. We'll talk about them in just a little bit, but things went right for Troubleshooting, as we said, got a very good trip. He's the kind of horse that can make his own good trip, Scott. I just wonder if he's going to be able to keep holding this form as the distances get longer.
I agree with the sentiment on distance, and he just, we didn't really see the way the race played out. There were horses coming on late, and the horse on the lead, Golden Afternoon, didn't hit the board, but just overall, it was a race that favored those along the inside and more forward than others. Is he going to keep getting races like that? Maybe, but the thing that just bugs me the most is how many times they sprinted this horse before giving him the shot. And that just kind of goes along with the pedigree and what I see myself. So as a favorite, I feel like there's better ways to invest my money.
The number 3 Montador has done very little wrong so far in his career. He's finished in the exacta in all 5 starts, did get disqualified out of one of those, but he's gotten back on turf routing recently and done very well at it. He just barely lost the tenacious leader 2 back at Keeneland. That one flattered the form in the Bryan Station, the replay that we just took a look at. And Scott, this horse came to Churchill Downs last time, and yes, he got a good trip against Allowance Company, but he was pretty impressive in that last race.
He was, and normally I, would look at this horse and say, "Oh, coming off a good trip at 5-1, I don't know how much I like him." But I think the fact that Michael Stidham's bringing him back so quickly points to the fact that he thinks he's in very good form right now. This horse doesn't have kind of the back history, if you will, that a lot of these other horses have. Only has 5 starts, and 4 of them are since late July. So I think he's the right horse right now coming into this race. And Louis Saez, I think he's going to have him in a very good spot, just like he did last time.
Kind of funny, not a whole lot of jockey loyalty with this horse. Louis Saez is going to be his 6th different jockey in 6 starts. Maybe that inflates the price a little bit because some other jockeys are going elsewhere in this race. The number 4, Aragona, he's a horse who's had a lot of experience, making the 13th start of his career. He is coming off a stakes victory on the turf. That was in the Hawthorne Derby, where he was beating a weaker field than the one he's going to meet here. But, if you go a few starts back in his form line, Scott, he didn't run that badly, but having some traffic in the stretch of the Secretariat at Colonial.
I think he's one that we would need the fast pace to have any shot in here. I think he's a cut below the top in this field. But if they go at it early, he's showed the ability to finish pretty well. In the Secretariat, he came home pretty good that day, albeit, most of the field did. But overall, I think he's a cut below. He has hit the board in both of his starts over this course, though.
The number 5, Outrunner, still eligible for a first-level allowance race, but he's run pretty well against Stakes Company a couple of times, including in his last start, the Old Dominion Derby at Colonial Downs, where he finished 3rd behind World Beater, who I think that was the last time we saw him on the track, but he was a horse who was in very good form into late summer of this year after winning a stakes at Saratoga. So good form for Outrunner coming into this race. He is entering off a bit of a layoff, Scott, going out for a barn that isn't necessarily known for shipping to Kentucky and winning a stakes race, but he's 30-1 in the morning line. You could do worse looking for a big price in here.
I think so as well. He has tactical speed, so if they don't go fast, he can, be up close. He can grind. When I looked at this horse at first, I thought, maybe prep, maybe they're pointing to this spot. And to your point about Jorge Duarte Jr. not really running a lot at Churchill. 1 starter, I think, the last 5 years, but it was a winner with nothing better. So not a major stake, but maybe just an additional reason to include a big price.
The number 6, Mansetti, is in a similar boat to California Burrito, who we kicked off this preview with, a horse who's run on the dirt and synthetic, getting on the turf for the first time here. And we should note he is the King's Plate winner from earlier this summer at Woodbine, so he definitely has some credentials under his belt trying the turf for the first time against Stakes Company. Scott, there is some pedigree here. I mean, collected, he's proven to be a pretty good turf influence, and there's some turf on the dam side. I just don't know how I see this horse stacking up against this field based on the Woodbine form, because I think he might have to take a slight step forward getting on the turf.
Yeah, generally you do, not to knock the Woodbine form, but generally it doesn't stack up tremendously. You see him here, and that is the King's Plate that we're watching. Or no, that's actually the Ontario Derby where he finishes 2nd. In the King's Plate, what you mentioned, he had everything his way. They just kind of let him loose on the lead. I don't know at a mile and a 16th if he's going to be able to just totally control the pace at a pace that he likes. So I don't know. I think it's cool that he's in this race. I'm interested to see how he runs.
The number 7, Giocoso, he is another one of those horses coming out of the Bryan Station at Keeneland. He was a pretty good 3rd behind the winner troubleshooting on that day. Went off at a fairly generous 10-1. I think he was way shorter than that of the morning line, so the bettors didn't go for him on that occasion, but he has a horse that has really found some consistency late in his 3-year-old season. I think he's run well in each of the last 3 stakes races. You could argue he was even best 2 back in the Gun Runner, because that was a very fast pace that came apart. He maybe moved too soon to take the lead that day. And Scott, the trip last time in the Bryan Station was a little strange because while it worked out in the sense that, he got over the 2 path and was able to make that run, it just seemed like he was never settling early in that race.
Yeah, maybe, and that makes a lot of sense because his 2 previous races, he was up a little bit closer to the pace. And I don't know, Ben Curtis was aboard him that day. It's Jose Ortiz on Saturday with Ben Curtis already moving, shifting his tack to Fairgrounds, but that's a pretty big positive. Keith DeSormo able to attract Jose Ortiz, not necessarily someone that normally rides for him. He needs to be kind of a little bit closer. I don't think he can come with a big run like Ben tried last time. I think he needs to be more up close and just kind of pass horses with a little bit of a slower pace maybe, but he fits.
The number 8, Chapman's Peak, he'll be making his stakes debut in this race, looking for 3 turf victories in a row after he broke his maiden 2-back and then won against Allowance Company last time at Keeneland. We'll take a look at the replay of that most recent start, and he was a pretty decisive winner of this race, Scott. He did have things in his favor. I mean, first of all, I don't think this was the strongest first allowance that we've seen get run at Keeneland, and Armad Ortiz did get him into a very advantageous position. There wasn't a whole lot of speed in this race. He put this horse on the front end and was just able to wire this field after setting some moderate fractions. I don't know if that trip's going to be available to him here, but this horse has a pretty nice pedigree and does appear to be moving in the right direction for Brad Cox.
Now, this is a good family, good female family, good Dolphin family, but the last two to me really aren't indicative of what we can expect here. So it would be kind of a price dependent thing. Kentucky Downs, mile and 5/16 for 3-year-olds and up maiden specials. They're not even remotely close to the field, the quality of this. And then you said it last time, another kind of condition that doesn't necessarily produce the kind of field that he's seeing today. And he had everything his way, rode a good rail while on the lead. He's one I'm willing to let beat me, but I know he can beat me.
Yeah, I mean, he's 9-2 on the morning line is, I think, the third choice. That's way too short for me to take some of those question marks that are surrounding this horse coming into this race. The number 9, Flying Mohawk, he's one that got really good going back to last fall, the end of his 2-year-old season, into the beginning of his 3-year-old season this winter. It even ran pretty well when he got on the synthetic course in the Jeff Ruby Stakes ahead of the Kentucky Derby, moved a little sooner than the winner of that race, Final Gambit, but still was a good second, qualified for the Kentucky Derby. Probably didn't belong in that race, but the connections took a shot, as you kind of have to do when you have a horse qualify for the Derby. And it's kind of been a struggle getting him back to the races since then, Scott. I think he was entered in the Pennine Ridge Belmont Stakes week at Saratoga, had to scratch. Then he was entered again. I think it was the Belmont Derby at Saratoga a month later, scratched again. So he's had some issues getting back to the races. Now they've given him time. He's gotten a more consistent work tab underneath him to come back for this. But going back to the beginning of this year, Scott, this horse did look like he was developing into a pretty talented turf horse.
Absolutely agree. Now, they took the blinkers off for the Derby for whatever reason. Maybe to just, I mean, I think they were just hoping to try to just figure out a way for him to put in a late run in that race and not get caught up maybe and get a piece. They put the blinkers back on. You know, the issues, like you mentioned, not being able to race when trying to, always a concern. His best finish was definitely in the Jeff Ruby, if you just kind of watch the energy, but he had a good setup in there and had a good setup in his Fairgrounds win. He's, of course, another one that's kind of a price-dependent horse, but my gut tells me I want to watch one here, maybe at Turfway Park this winter.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to expect from him, but I've got to say I was really impressed by the visual of each of those turf victories going back to last winter and fall. We'll see if he can build on that form here. The number 10, Simulate. He's a horse that is another one coming out of the Bryan Station, as is the case for the last two that we'll talk about. And they were actually two of the last horses across the wire at that Bryan Station, both putting in disappointing performances. Simulate was a horse that I actually thought was pretty interesting. When I handicapped that race, Scott, it just never looked like he was really getting over that Keeneland course. He was farther back early than I think he wanted to be, could never get a rally going. He's kind of a funny horse because when you see him, he's not the biggest frame to him, but he really extends himself when he's feeling the ground underneath him. He's got a very long stride on him for his frame. We saw him really extend when he won that allowance race at Saratoga, but he's the kind of horse that I wonder if he's really loving these different sort of turf courses that he's encountering in Kentucky.
Good points there. I like this horse a lot. That Saratoga race where he won at a good price and finished full run did get a good trip, but 13 Colonies, I think, is pretty legitimate. The horse that finished second. I'm just wondering if perhaps maybe he doesn't look like he didn't look at all like the same horse in the Bryan Station. Really very little fight. I'm just wondering how much the race at a mile and 5/16 at Kentucky Downs took out of him. It's a tough post here. I'll be hurt probably if he wins it at a pretty good price here, but I just have a lot of questions here on a horse that I once was very high on.
And the number 11, Plenza, he's in a similar boat, a horse that looked like he could have been competitive on paper in that Bryan Station, put in a really disappointing effort, finishing 11th of 12. Now, he did have a trip excuse in that race because he didn't get away the best and then was wide most of the way, so the ground loss definitely contributed to the finish. He still, though, never unleashed any sort of closing run, and even when I go back to that victory in the Gun Runner where he upset the field to 22-1, Scott, you could argue he was the beneficiary of a pretty favorable pace setup in there.
Yeah, if I'm not going to Simulate, it's just hard for me to Plenza. He's one path wider. He's going to be coming from well out of it. I just don't know if he's sitting on his best race. So, yeah, Plenza to me, not all that much interest, but 12-1 from the outside. Giroux, who I don't necessarily think fits the horse, the way I think of Florent perfectly, but he's been the one that's been aboard as both of his wins.
Well, everybody, as we transition to take a look at our picks for this race, make sure to hit that subscribe button below this video to not miss any updates coming on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Let's take a look at who Scott and I like in this Commonwealth Turf. And Scott, you're going to put the up-and-coming number 3 Montador on top. This will be a stakes debut, but he's a horse that has been improving over his last several starts.
Yeah, I just think he might be the now horse. A lot of these horses are either maybe not in ready for their best, and also maybe you have run a lot. Like Troubleshooting's had 7 starts already this year. I think Montador has started a lot, but the fact that Michael Stidham kind of rushing him back here to me, I'm taking as a positive. So hopefully we'll get around that 5-1. But you're the one taking the big swing, so talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agree among the logical horses out of the Bryan Station. The number 7, Giocoso, is probably the horse that we want to use. You've got him second. I've got him third. I think he's the logical pick for me. But I mean, among some of the more creative options, I think Flying Mohawk is a horse that I want to have in there somewhere, especially if he's a generous price coming off the layoff. But the number 1, California Burrito, he's a horse that I've wanted to see on the turf based on pedigree. And he did show some talent going back to the early part of the season. And we saw Tom Drury do this with another horse, a filly named Admit, who was a turfway synth specialist who has gotten pretty good on the turf recently. So we'll see if he can be the same thing with California Burrito at a price 1,973 for me and 3,7,210 for Scott. In race 10, the Saturday race of the day, it is the Grade 3 Commonwealth Turf at Churchill. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.